The late afternoon sun clung stubbornly to the horizon, painting the asphalt of Westridge Elementary's parking lot in long, golden shadows. Maxwell Pierce's Bentley purred to a stop at the curb, its polished chrome catching the dying light. He didn't wait for his driver to open the door. Maxwell was already striding out, his Italian leather shoes tapping sharply against the pavement. He checked the time 15 minutes late. Always 15 minutes late these days. Work had a way of swallowing him whole, until the only thing left was regret. He had promised Oliver he would be early this time. As he rounded the corner toward the side entrance, the sound reached him first children's laughter, but sharp and cruel, cutting through the mellow evening air. His pace quickened. The laughter grew louder, meaner, until he came upon a scene that stopped him cold. Oliver stood small and trembling, his leg braces glinting under the sun, his crutches knocked aside in the dirt. 3 boys loomed around him, their jeers circling like vultures. His glasses lay broken at his feet, and tears streaked his cheeks. Maxwell's stomach twisted. Rage surged through him, but before he could lunge forward, something unexpected caught his eye. A figure darted between Oliver and the bullies. A girl, thin, ragged, her hair tangled into a wild brown mane, spread her arms wide like a shield. Her clothes hung loose on her small frame, patched and stained, as if they had passed through too many hands before landing on her back. She was no older than 9, yet her voice carried a force that made the jeering boys hesitate. "Leave him alone," she demanded, her chin raised defiantly. "Pick on someone your own size," the tallest bully sneered, taking a step forward. "What are you going to do about it? Trash girl. Everyone knows you live behind the supermarket." His words dripped with contempt. Maxwell's breath caught. Trash girl. Homeless. But she didn't flinch. She shifted her stance, feet planted firmly, arms still stretched as if daring them to try. "I said leave him alone." Her voice dropped lower, sharper, carrying an edge of warning that silenced even the laughter. Something about her, about the tilt of her chin, the fire in her gaze, hit Maxwell like a punch. He had seen that exact determination before. Years ago. In Catherine. In the woman he had loved and lost. His heart stuttered in his chest. The boy lunged, trying to shove Oliver to the ground. The girl moved like lightning, sidestepping, thrusting out a foot, sending him sprawling face first in the dirt. The other 2 boys faltered, their bravado unraveling into uncertainty. For a breathless moment, no one moved. Then Oliver, wide-eyed, whispered in relief, "My daddy's here." 3 pairs of bully eyes snapped toward Maxwell, and recognition lit their faces like sparks. They froze. Everyone in the state knew his name, his wealth, his power. Without another word, they scattered, sneakers pounding against the pavement as they vanished into the distance. Maxwell surged forward, kneeling beside Oliver, his voice thick. "Are you okay, buddy?" Oliver sniffled, nodding as he clutched his father's sleeve. But Maxwell's eyes were no longer on his son. They were on the girl, who was backing away now, her defiance fading into weariness. Her chest rose and fell with quick breaths, her gaze darting nervously as though searching for an escape. "Wait," Maxwell called, his hand reaching out instinctively. "Please, I want to thank you." She froze, wary. Her blue eyes lifted to his, and in that instant Maxwell felt the ground tilt beneath him. Piercing, familiar, achingly familiar. He had seen those eyes before. He had kissed Catherine goodnight and looked into them. He saw them every day reflected in Oliver's face. His throat tightened. The world around him dimmed until there was only that gaze, steady and unyielding. Admiration surged in him, tangled with disbelief, tangled with something even deeper, a wild, impossible hope that made his hands tremble. For the first time in 3 years, since that terrible night when the river stole his daughter, Maxwell Pierce felt his heart stir with something other than grief. The pizza boxes sat open on a weathered picnic table, their cardboard edges curling in the cool evening air. The smell of melted cheese and warm crust drifted across the playground, clinging to the fading sunlight. Oliver balanced awkwardly on the bench, his crutches propped nearby, while the girl who had saved him devoured her 3rd slice with a hunger that was almost painful to watch. Maxwell Pierce, billionaire, CEO, man who had negotiated deals worth billions without flinching, sat utterly undone by the sight of a child eating pizza. Not just any child, this child. Every gesture scraped against buried memories. The way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The precise motion of her small fingers wiping sauce from her lips, tiny. Ordinary things that thundered through Maxwell like echoes of someone he thought he'd lost forever. He tried to stay composed, tried to keep his face neutral, his voice steady, but his insides were a storm. For every detail that whispered Catherine's presence, another voice inside him screamed, "This is impossible." She died, Emma died. Oliver, oblivious to the heavy silence between his father and the girl, giggled. "You eat faster than me," he said, grinning. His voice cracked with genuine delight, as if the earlier cruelty had already been erased. "You're like a superhero. You saved me." Emma paused, her eyes flickering between the boy and his father. She swallowed hard, then shrugged. "Those boys were jerks," she said simply, though her small shoulders carried a kind of weariness that no child should know. Maxwell leaned forward, his hands clasped together to hide their trembling. "Emma," he said softly, careful not to spook her. "Where you live?" Her eyes sharpened instantly. He recognized that look. It was survival. "Nowhere. Everywhere," she answered, evasive but honest. "Sometimes the shelter. Sometimes other places." She stuffed another bite of pizza into her mouth as if the food could cover her discomfort. Maxwell felt a crack deep in his chest, the kind that threatened to split him open. He couldn't stop staring. He couldn't stop hearing Catherine's laughter, Catherine's lullabies, Catherine's voice whispering the name they had chosen together, Emma. He took out his phone, his fingers clumsy, and opened the gallery. The screen glowed with images of Oliver in the hospital after the accident, Catherine smiling at the beach, and then he froze Catherine holding their toddler daughter. Tiny Emma, 3 years old, her hair curling around her face, her little hand reaching toward the camera. Maxwell turned the phone, sliding it across the table toward the girl. His voice was barely audible. "Do you recognize her?" Emma stared at the photo. For a long moment she didn't breathe. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "No," she whispered, but something in her expression faltered. A hesitation that sent Maxwell's pulse racing. "But I dream about a lady sometimes. She sings to me. She has the same eyes as him." She pointed at Oliver with a small, uncertain hand. Maxwell's breath hitched. Catherine. It had to be Catherine. Catherine had sung the same lullaby to Emma every night. The same one Maxwell sometimes caught Oliver humming in his sleep. His head swam. Oliver reached across the table, sliding his small hand into Emma's. "You can stay with us," he said innocently, as if the matter were that simple. "We have lots of food, and my dad's house is huge." Emma's eyes darted away, her fingers twitching like she wanted to pull back, but she didn't. She left her hand in Oliver's, and her lower lip trembled almost imperceptibly. Maxwell felt the moment seize him, the fragile, impossible possibility hanging between them like a thread. He leaned in, his voice low, urgent. "Emma," he said, "how old are you?" "9," she replied without hesitation. Her tone was matter of fact, but Maxwell felt the air leave his lungs. 9. Exactly the age as Emma would be if she had survived. The shadows grew longer across the playground, and somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled from a nearby church. Maxwell didn't hear it. He was caught in the storm of his own disbelief, staring at a girl who should not exist and yet sat across from him, alive, breathing, sharing pizza with his son. And then, as if to tighten the noose of mystery, Emma whispered, almost to herself, "I remember water, screaming, the different places. Always different places." Maxwell's blood ran cold. The night of the storm, the river, the bridge, the accident. Every detail collided violently inside him. He wanted to reach across the table, to hold her, to claim her. But she was skittish, wary, half wild from years of abandonment. One wrong move and she would vanish like smoke. "Emma," he said, his voice breaking despite himself. "Please, just let me help you." Her piercing blue eyes lifted to his, and for the first time, Maxwell felt as though she saw through him, straight into his grief, his guilt, his desperate hope. But before he could speak again, before he could ask the questions clawing at his throat, a shadow stirred at the edge of the playground. An older woman stood watching from a sleek black car, her jeweled hand resting against the window. Genevieve Pierce, Maxwell's mother, and she was not smiling. The study was dark except for the faint glow of the fireplace, its flames crackling against polished marble. Maxwell Pierce sat slouched in a leather armchair, his platinum watch forgotten on the desk beside him, his tie loosened, his usually composed features broken by shadows. The mansion was silent, but inside his head the noise was deafening, memories crashing like waves against jagged stone. On the desk, spread across the polished oak surface, were photographs. Catherine, radiant and laughing, holding their daughter with the kind of tenderness that had once made Maxwell believe nothing in the world could touch them. Catherine, on the night of the accident, wearing that sapphire necklace he had given her for their anniversary. And then, Catherine's absence photographs of her grave, news clippings about the storm, the headlines that had turned his tragedy into public spectacle. Pierce ere lost to River's wrath, Maxwell gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles whitened. He could still hear the roar of the water, still feel the shattering impact of the car hitting the guardrail. Oliver's screams, Catherine's hand slipping from his grasp, Emma's small body pulled away by the merciless current. He had replayed that night for 3 years, a punishment on repeat, a wound that never healed. And yet now there was her, the girl with the same blue eyes, the same stubborn chin, a child who fought bullies with the same fire. Catherine had once wielded against boardroom adversaries twice her size. Emma Sullivan, she had called herself, but her age, her gestures, her fragments of memory water, screaming fit to perfectly with the life Maxwell had buried. He poured himself a drink, though his hand trembled so much the amber liquid nearly spilled. He didn't taste it. He stared into the fire, seeing only Catherine smile and the way Emma had tilted her head at him. Wary but unbroken, the creak of the study door startled him. Oliver patted in, his braces clicking faintly against the hardwood floor. "Dad." His voice was small, uncertain. "You're still awake." Maxwell forced a smile, though his heart felt like lead. "Couldn't sleep, buddy? What are you doing up?" Oliver came closer, holding something in his hand. It was the broken frame of his glasses, the lens cracked from earlier. He set it on the desk. "She was brave," he said softly, almost reverently. "Emma, she didn't even know me, but she stood in front of me like she wasn't scared at all." Maxwell swallowed hard. "Yes, she was brave." Oliver hesitated, then asked the question Maxwell wasn't ready for. "Is she my sister?" The room tilted. Maxwell's breath hitched as if he'd been struck. He tried to steady himself, tried to anchor his voice. "Why would you say that?" Oliver shrugged, eyes wide and unguarded. "She feels like family, like I've known her forever. And when she held my hand, it felt like Mom was close." Maxwell pressed his fist against his mouth to keep from breaking. The innocence of his son's words carved deeper than any boardroom betrayal, any corporate enemy. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to scream it. But until he knew the truth, until the proof was in his hands, he couldn't risk tearing Oliver's fragile heart apart again. "I don't know," Maxwell whispered at last. "But maybe it's possible." Oliver nodded, satisfied with that answer in the way only a child could be. He leaned against Maxwell's arm, yawning. She should come back. She shouldn't be alone. Maxwell held his son close, staring into the fire as a new determination burned within him. He would find out the truth. He owed Catherine that much. He owed Oliver. He owed Emma. But in the shadows of the hallway outside, another figure lingered. Genevieve Pierce, Maxwell's mother, her silhouette sharp and elegant in the half-light. She had listened to every word, her lips tightening as Oliver spoke of family. In her hand, she still held the tablet that displayed the photographs taken earlier that day, the ones of Maxwell. With the ragged girl, Genevieve's eyes glimmered with a cold, calculating light. She whispered to herself, "Not again. I won't let the past unravel everything I've built." Maxwell did not know it yet, but while he wrestled with grief and hope, his mother was already moving pieces into place. And somewhere in the city, the girl with Catherine's eyes lay awake on a thin shelter cot, staring at the ceiling. Haunted by dreams she could not explain, a woman's voice singing softly against the rush of a storm. The past was clawing its way back, and none of them were ready for the truths buried beneath the water. Asterisk, the shelter smelled faintly of disinfectant and old blankets. The kind of place where warmth came not from the building itself, but from the few kind hearts who chose to stay and help. Maxwell had never stepped foot in such a place. His world was glass towers, private jets, and boardrooms lined with leather chairs. Yet here he was, ducking beneath a low archway into a building with flickering fluorescent lights and scuffed linoleum floors. He should not have been here. Billionaires did not wander through the city's forgotten corners. But Maxwell Pierce was no longer a man tethered to shouldn't. Ever since Emma appeared in his son's life, every instinct in him screamed the answers lay where she slept. Through the glass window of the common room, he saw her. Emma sat cross-legged on a threadbare rug, her hair spilling like a tangle of shadows around her small shoulders. She wasn't eating this time. She wasn't fighting. She was reading aloud from a battered storybook to the younger children, their eyes wide, their faces glowing in the dim light. Her voice clear, steady, protective rose above the faint hum of the shelter. Something twisted inside Maxwell. She had the poise of a child forced to grow up too soon, the authority of someone who knew pain but refused to pass it on. A woman approached him from behind, her step soft but her voice firm. "Mr. Pierce, I'm Mrs. Winters. You called ahead." She was middle-aged, her apron stained from the kitchen, her eyes tired but kind. "Emma's a good kid, one of the best we've had." Maxwell turned toward her, his jaw tight. "How long has she been here?" Mrs. Winters frowned, folding her arms. "On and off for about a year. But she never stays long, rules say 3 nights max. She disappears for days, then comes back. Won't say much about where she goes in between." She studied him carefully. "Why are you asking about her?" Maxwell hesitated, the truth heavy on his tongue. "Because she might be my daughter. Because I can't look at her without seeing Catherine. Because I've been haunted for 3 years and tonight I felt her ghost breathe again. Instead," he said, "she saved my son." Mrs. Winters smiled faintly. "That sounds like Emma. Brave as they come." Then her face darkened. "But there's something off. We've tried to trace her records. She showed up one day, no file, no history before the age of 3. That's impossible for the system. Every child has some kind of trail. Emma's just starts." Maxwell's blood turned cold. "At 3? He asked sharply. Mrs. Winters nodded. "That's all I know." Maxwell pressed his hand to the window glass as if he could reach her through it. Emma laughed softly at something one of the children said, her teeth flashing, her eyes alight despite the bleakness around her. The sound stabbed at him, so achingly familiar that it felt like Catherine's laughter had returned from the grave. Then Emma looked up. Their eyes met across the room, and for a heartbeat, the chaos of the shelter vanished. Maxwell froze. Her gaze piercing, unflinching wasn't the look of a child caught doing something wrong. It was the look of someone daring him to step closer. But before Maxwell could move, the front door banged open. Cold night air swept in along with a figure dressed in a dark coat, heels clacking against the tile. Genevieve Pierce, his mother. The entire room seemed to shrink. Mrs. Winters stiffened, her face tightening as though she recognized danger when she saw it. "Maxwell," Genevieve said smoothly, her diamond-studded hand curling around the strap of her bag. "Imagine my surprise to find you in a place like this, looking for strays." Her gaze slid past him, landing on Emma. Something sharp glittered in her expression, like recognition wrapped in disdain. Emma shifted uncomfortably, lowering her book. The children pressed closer to her, as if sensing the tension radiating from the elegantly dressed stranger. Maxwell stepped between them. "What are you doing here, Mother?" His voice was steel. Genevieve's lips curved into the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "You've been seen, Maxwell, with this girl. Do you know how quickly rumors spread when the name Pierce is attached?" "She has nothing to do with you," Maxwell snapped, his protective instincts flaring. Go. "But she has everything to do with me," Genevieve purred, "and with the empire you will inherit. Children like her, they disrupt. They complicate. You've forgotten what happened the last time you let sentiment guide you." Maxwell's heart pounded. The last time. The accident. The night that destroyed his family. Genevieve leaned closer, her voice a velvet dagger. "Some ghosts should stay buried." Emma's eyes widened, confusion flickering across her face. She looked from Maxwell to Genevieve, sensing the undercurrent, but not understanding. Maxwell clenched his fists, torn between fury and dread. Genevieve knew something, more than she was saying, perhaps more than he was prepared to hear. And in that moment, as Emma's blue eyes locked with his once more, Maxwell realized the battle was no longer just about proving the impossible truth. It was about protecting her from a danger he hadn't seen coming, one that lived inside his own bloodline. The shelter felt suddenly too small, too fragile, too exposed, and Maxwell knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone. Whatever secrets his mother had buried, Emma was the key. The city was draped in night, its towers glittering like distant constellations. But Maxwell Pierce wasn't looking at the skyline from his penthouse window. His attention was locked on the folders spread across his desk, each one thicker than the last, each one a puzzle piece in a picture he wasn't sure he wanted to complete. Private investigators had been working around the clock. When money wasn't an obstacle, the trail could be pried open, even trails someone had tried to bury. And Emma's trail, if it could be called, that was a graveyard of missing records. Blank pages and contradictions, her official story began abruptly at the age of 3, with a hospital intake form and a rural clinic. No prior medical history, no birth certificate, no known parents. The form itself was suspicious, written in rushed handwriting. The attending doctor long since retired, but the real crack came from a name scribbled in the margin: foster transfer, M. Calloway. Maxwell's investigator, a grizzled man named Hammond, had tracked down Calloway, a former foster coordinator who now lived in a crumbling apartment complex on the city's edge. Maxwell had gone himself, unwilling to trust second-hand accounts. The man was frail, his cough rattling like loose chains. But when Maxwell showed him a photograph of Emma taken discreetly at the shelter, Calloway's eyes widened with something that looked a lot like fear. She was the river girl, Calloway rasped. They told me never to ask questions. Just pass her along. Who told you? Maxwell pressed, his voice like iron. Calloway's hands trembled as he fumbled for a cigarette. You don't understand. People like me, we didn't ask names. But I know money when I see it. Somebody paid to keep her untraceable, to scatter her. Different homes, different towns. She never stayed long. His eyes darted toward the window as if shadows could hear him, like she wasn't supposed to exist. Maxwell's blood ran cold. Paid. Someone had made sure Emma disappeared into the cracks, scrubbed from records, passed like contraband. He left Calloway's apartment with a storm inside him, his mind spinning through possibilities. Back in his study, Hammond laid out the latest findings. There's a pattern, he said, his voice low. Every time the girl was placed, the foster families were suddenly flushed with cash. Nothing official, just unmarked bills. Then, within weeks, Emma was moved again. Too many times to be chance. Maxwell's hand tightened around the edge of the desk. He thought of his mother Genevieve's cold smile at the shelter, her veiled warning about ghosts. The way she had always spoken of Catherine as a liability, a distraction from legacy. Could it be? Could she have orchestrated the disappearance of her own granddaughter? His chest constricted, rage clawing at the edges of his composure. For 3 years, he had lived in a coffin of grief, mourning a daughter he thought drowned, while Emma had been shuffled like a pawn on some monstrous chessboard. And then there were Emma's words, echoing in his memory. I remember water, screaming, then different places, the accident, the river. She had survived. Someone had plucked her from the chaos, not to save her but to erase her. Oliver's laughter drifted faintly from the next room, and the sound nearly broke Maxwell. His son had suffered enough, paralyzed, haunted, growing up with the hollow space of a sister who should have been at his side. Now she was within reach, but danger was circling closer. Maxwell snapped the folder shut. Find out who paid Calloway, he ordered Hammond. His voice was sharp, unyielding. Find every trail, every dollar. I want names. Hammond hesitated. And if the trail leads where we think it leads? Maxwell's jaw tightened. Then it leads to war. Later that night, as he sat alone in the silence of the mansion, his phone buzzed. A message. No name, just a single line. Stop digging, or you'll lose more than you already have. His hand trembled as he stared at the words. The threat wasn't vague. It was personal. Whoever had taken Emma, whoever had buried her identity, knew he was close. And they were watching. Maxwell's reflection in the glass window looked back at him, a man torn between fury and fear. Between the empire he was meant to protect and the daughter he might finally reclaim. The stakes had shifted. This was no longer about grief or hope. It was about survival. And somewhere, in the shelter's quiet dormitory, Emma stirred in her sleep, whispering through a dream she could not remember. While unseen eyes lingered in the shadows outside her window, the game had begun, and the cost of losing would be more than Maxwell could bear. The boardroom at Pierce Industries had always been Maxwell's arena. A cathedral of power-polished mahogany tables, high-backed leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows that stared down at the city like a watchful king. Deals worth billions had been made here, fortunes sealed with the flick of his pen. But tonight, the room felt like a cage. Genevieve Pierce sat at the head of the table, as if it still belonged to her, as if she hadn't retired years ago. Her diamonds glittered under the recessed lights, but it was her eyes sharp, icy, calculating that demanded obedience. She held a folder in her manicured hands, the kind of folder that could change lives with its contents. You're reckless, Maxwell, she said, her voice velvet wrapped around steel, parading that child around in public, whispering to investigators. Do you have any idea what you're inviting? Maxwell stood at the opposite end, shoulders squared, fist clenched at his sides. I'm inviting the truth. The truth? Genevieve's laugh was brittle. The truth is what you make of it. The world doesn't care about facts. It cares about perception. And the perception is this: our family is clean, untouchable, worthy of its empire. You drag a ragged street urchin into our circle, and that illusion shatters. She's not an urchin. Maxwell shot back. His voice cracked with more than anger. It cracked with something raw. Something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. She's a child. A child who risked herself for Oliver. A child who has Catherine's eyes. At the mention of Catherine, a flicker of irritation broke Genevieve's mask. You still cling to that woman's memory, she said coldly. She made you weak. She nearly destroyed everything your father and I built. And now you would let her ghost poison what's left. Maxwell took a step closer. The storm in him barely contained. Weak. Catherine was the strongest person I've ever known. And Emma. He broke off, choking on the name. Emma is proof that the night of the accident didn't end the way you wanted me to believe. Genevieve's grip on the folder tightened. Her silence was damning. You knew. Maxwell whispered, realization dawning like ice water down his spine. You knew she survived. The room thickened with tension. The hum of the city below fading into nothing. Genevieve rose slowly, deliberately, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She placed the folder on the table between them and slid it forward with 2 fingers. Do you really want to see? She asked softly. Do you really want to open doors you can't close? Maxwell stared at the folder as if it were a live grenade. His hand hovered over it, trembling. Then he pulled it toward him and flipped it open. Inside were photographs. Grainy surveillance shots of Emma at different ages, 4, 6, 8, standing outside shabby homes, sitting alone at playgrounds, always with that same defiant tilt of her chin. Attached to each photo was a note, payments listed in neat columns. Money had followed her like a shadow, proof of the system Genevieve had orchestrated. Maxwell's stomach churned. You did this. His voice was low, venomous. You scattered her. You paid to erase her. Genevieve didn't deny it. She simply stepped closer, her presence towering even without raising her voice. I protected you. Protected Oliver. Do you know what it would have meant for the company if news spread that one heir was dead and the other broken? We would have been vultured alive. Investors don't fund weakness, Maxwell. They consume it. His eyes burned as he looked at her, the woman who had once been just mother. You let me bury my daughter. You let me mourn her, grieve her, believe she was gone. His fist shook as he slammed the folder shut. You stole 3 years of her life from me. Asterisk, she was never yours to begin with, Genevieve hissed, her veneer cracking. She was a liability, a mistake born of Catherine's foolish dreams. I did what needed to be done. Maxwell's body went rigid. For a moment, he could barely breathe. Then the dam inside him broke. No, mother, he said, his voice shaking with fury. What you did wasn't protection. It was murder in slow motion. And I swear to you, I will not let you take her from me again. Genevieve's lips curved into a thin smile, as though she had expected his rebellion. You think you can protect her? Do you really believe the wolves won't come for her when they learn who she is? Do you believe you can shield Oliver, too? You've already lost once, Maxwell. How many more graves can you bear? The words were a dagger, twisting in his chest. But instead of breaking him, they ignited something fierce. For the first time since the night of the accident, Maxwell felt clarity. He would burn his empire to ash before he let his mother or anyone touch Emma again. As he stormed out of the boardroom, the folder clutched in his hand. Genevieve's voice followed him like a curse. Asterisk, you can fight me, Maxwell, but the world is mine. And soon, you will understand you don't win by loving. You win by erasing. Maxwell didn't turn back. He couldn't. The only thing that mattered now was the girl with Catherine's eyes, and the war that was about to consume them all. Asterisk. The storm rolled in without warning, black clouds tearing across the sky. Lightning splitting the night as if the heavens themselves were preparing for judgment. Rain hammered the glass walls of Maxwell Pierce's mansion, each strike echoing the pounding in his chest. The storm was a cruel reminder of that night 3 years ago, the night the bridge collapsed, the night Catherine died, the night Emma was swallowed by the river now. Against the storm's fury, everything was coming to a head. Emma sat curled on a velvet sofa in the living room, her knees tucked to her chest, Oliver beside her. The 2 children whispered to each other, their bond already woven in threads stronger than blood. Maxwell watched them from across the room, unable to look away. It was all too much, that impossible hope, the terror of losing her again, the rage burning in him after Genevieve's confession. On the table between them sat the DNA envelope, a thin slip of paper that would confirm or crush the truth. Maxwell's hands hovered over it, shaking. For once in his life, he was afraid to know. Deals, wars, fortunes, he had faced them all without flinching. But this was his heart on trial. Dad? Oliver's small voice broke through the thunder. Open it. Emma's eyes darted to him, wide and uncertain, as though bracing for the moment the fragile world she had built might collapse. Maxwell tore the seal. He unfolded the paper. The words blurred at first, his eyes stinging. But then clarity cut through. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. He staggered, breath ragged. Emma, he whispered, his voice breaking. You're mine. You're my daughter. The paper slipped from his hand as he dropped to his knees in front of her. Emma's lips parted, trembling, her eyes searching his face for a lie, for a trick. No, she murmured. That can't. No one ever wanted me. Nobody ever. Maxwell pulled her into his arms before she could finish. I wanted you. Every day. Every night. I thought I lost you. But you're here. You're here. For the first time, Emma let herself collapse into someone's embrace. She buried her face against his chest, and her small body shook with sobs. Oliver wrapped his arms around both of them, tears shining behind his glasses. For one fleeting moment, it felt like salvation, like a family restored. Then the lights flickered. The storm rattled the mansion's frame, and the front door slammed open. Genevieve Pierce stepped inside, flanked by two men in dark suits. Her diamonds glowed even in the dim light, her presence cold and commanding. Beautiful, isn't it? She said, her voice carrying above the storm. A family reunion. She took a step forward, her eyes locking on Emma. But families, Maxwell, are liabilities. You think you've saved her. In truth, you've doomed her. Maxwell rose, pulling Emma and Oliver behind him. If you touch her, if you so much as breathe in her direction, Genevieve's smile was a blade. You think love is a shield. No, it's a leash, and I've held yours for years. That girl was supposed to disappear. I saw to it myself, and yet here she is. Proof that fate mocks even me. Her voice sharpened. But I can fix this. The suited men moved forward, but Maxwell stepped into their path, fury radiating from him like fire. You'll have to go through me. And I swear, Mother, if you try, I will burn Pierce Industries to the ground. I will salt the earth your empire stands on. For the first time, Genevieve faltered. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face, a mask cracking under the weight of her own son's defiance. Emma, peeking from behind Maxwell, suddenly stepped forward. Her voice, though small, was clear. You don't scare me. Genevieve's eyes snapped to her, narrowing. You tried to erase me. Emma continued, her chin lifting with the same defiance Catherine once carried. But I'm still here, and I'm not going away. The storm roared louder, the house trembling as though the universe itself bore witness. Maxwell looked at his daughter, at the fire in her eyes, and realized Catherine lived on not just in memory, but in flesh, in spirit, in this child who had survived everything meant to destroy her. He turned back to Genevieve. This ends tonight. For a moment, no one moved. Thunder cracked, shaking the walls, and then silence. Genevieve's lips pressed into a thin line. She raised a hand, halting her men. This isn't over, she said quietly. You've made your choice, Maxwell. Pray you can live with it. She swept from the room, her men following like shadows swallowed by the storm. Maxwell collapsed into the sofa, pulling Emma and Oliver close. The storm outside raged on, but inside, something had shifted. A truth revealed, a bond restored, a vow sealed in the fire of defiance. The war with Genevieve was far from finished, but for the first time in years, Maxwell no longer felt hollow. He was no longer just a man haunted by ghosts. He was a father, and nothing, no empire, no storm, no enemy would take that from him again.